Well, welcome to all of you here and online. My friend texted me this morning and said they didn't plow me out, so I can't be here. So I'm sure that we're facing some of that this morning as well. But as I was thinking about this past week, I was reminded, you know what? Reach Church doesn't just happen for an hour here on Sunday mornings. Listen to what happened this past week. This past week on Monday night, we had a group of women at Denise Tyler's house. There she is. Pray big, pray big. They're learning how to pray big on Monday nights at Denise's house. And at the same time, we had a group of our men upstairs with Mike O'Neill leading. There he is, learning about how to work right as what God has called us to do, learning about work. So that was Monday night. Tuesday night, I get a text from Wilson and Jamie Forney. They had a big group of young adults at their house. They were laughing, they were carrying on, getting a little rowdy over there, getting a little crazy. That's good, that's what we like from our young adults. Wednesday night, Julie Metzger and Stephanie Becker, they had a study on Acts here at the church. It was awesome. Thursday night, the worship team was set up here, preparing for that wonderful set that you just experienced this morning. Thank our worship team, and Mike Brewer, where's Mike? He's back there somewhere. What a faithful guy he is, just leading his group all the time. My brother Jordan as well. We have so many people that are doing what God has called them to do all through the week. And right now, it isn't just the people in this room that are hearing the word of God and are worshiping with us right now. We have a group of people online that goes beyond our four walls that are watching as well. And all through the week, there are countless coffee dates, texts, friendships, prayers offered that I don't even know about, but that's what's happening. And you know what? That's what living to reach all people with nothing but Jesus looks like. It's not constrained to an hour on Sunday mornings. It's happening all through the week. And that's because, listen, the church is way more than a building. It's way more than an hour service on Sunday mornings. It's the people of God empowered to live in the purpose of God every single day, every single minute. That's what the church is. Living to reach all people with nothing but Jesus. But we do come together once a week, an hour or so, every Sunday, depending on how long the sermon goes. We'll see about that. But we come to encourage one another. We come to remind each other of what Jesus has done for us. We come to sing of his glory. We come to give praise to him, and that's what we've come to do. And today, it's a special day because you have chosen to come on the day that we bring the choir back. Yeah. So we are going to have a little small ensemble here shortly. We'll share that with you if you're interested in that. But we're not going to wait for that. We're bringing the choir back right now. You all are the choir. Surprise. We're going to have some fun today. All right, you ready? I want everyone to sing. All right, everyone's going to sing along. I'll catch you if you're not singing. Everyone's going to sing. Everyone knows this song. I want to hear you with everything you got. I'm going to start it, and then I'm not going to sing anymore because the people that are watching online, they can only hear me, okay? So I'm not going to embarrass myself. I'm going to turn off my mic, and maybe I'll sing along with you, okay? Here we go. Ready? Everybody sing. Ready? Here we go. This little light of... There we go. Yes. Wow. That was better than I thought. It really was. There's a couple more verses. My favorite, hide it under a bushel. I'm going to let it shine. Or the other one, don't let Satan It Al? You remember that one? I'm gonna let it shine. Yeah, that is not COVID friendly. Okay, we won't do that one. So we'll keep that one to ourselves. But yes, Let It Shine, one of our favorite songs from our childhood. And that is the title of today's message, Let It Shine, Let It Shine, Let It Shine. If you have your Bibles, go ahead and turn them to 1 Samuel chapter 18. This is part 4 of a sermon series on the life of David. We are excited to go see that show at Sight and Sound in April. That's going to be amazing. Last week, we read about one of the most famous stories in the entire Bible, David versus Goliath. We learned how to stand up and shout in victory. And you'd think that after beating Goliath, David's life would be smooth sailing from there. He beat Goliath. What more could you ask of David? He took down Goliath when no one else could. Doesn't he deserve to live in peace the rest of his life? I mean, he reached the top. But after David beats Goliath in 1 Samuel 17, he enters a long period of trials that actually continue through the rest of the book of 1 Samuel. So as we learn about these trials through the coming weeks, I'm sure David had to think, is this necessary? Is this really necessary? All of this? I faced Goliath, and now I have to face more? Are you kidding me? But listen to this. It pleased God in infinite love to make David pass through a long period of hard discipline and salutary training for the office to which he was to be raised. It pleased God in infinite love to make David pass through a long period of hard discipline. Listen, God doesn't waste one trial that you go through. He doesn't waste one tear that you cry. He doesn't waste one painful experience. There's a purpose in all things, and you might not see it at the moment, but we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good for those who are called according to his purpose. So you might be thinking, is this necessary? Rightfully so. But be reminded today that he's working all things together for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purpose. So let's get to our passage this morning. 1 Samuel 18, verse 6. As they were coming home, when David returned from striking down the Philistine, as they were coming home, that quick. And that's true in our lives, isn't it? As they were coming home, you're on top of the mountain and then boom. As they were coming home, guess what happens? I heard this quote one time and it's really stuck with me. It says, if you're in a blessing, enjoy it, because there's going to be another battle. And if you're in a battle, endure it, because there's going to be another blessing. Okay? As they were coming home, it didn't wait to start. This period of trials for David begins as they were coming home, right after this mountaintop moment. As they were coming home, when David returned from striking down the Philistine, the women came out of all the cities of Israel, singing and dancing to meet King Saul with tambourines, with songs of joy, and with musical instruments. And the women sang to one another as they celebrated. Saul has struck down his thousands, and David his 10,000s. And Saul was very angry, and this saying displeased him. He said, they have ascribed to David 10,000s, and to me they have ascribed thousands. And what more can he have but the kingdom? And Saul eyed David from that day on. Now, before we start pointing our finger and saying how petty Saul was for, they sang that I only got thousands and David got 10,000s. He can sound a little petty here. But before we start pointing our finger at Saul, do you sometimes have this same struggle in your heart? The struggle of jealousy, envy, coveting others. These words all have subtle differences between them: jealousy, envy, coveting, but they're all related. Jealousy is actually defined sometimes as resentfully envious. And the Westminster Shorter Catechism of Faith, it says this about the 10th commandment, which is, thou shalt not covet. What is forbidden in the 10th commandment? It says, the 10th commandment forbiddeth all discontentment with our own estate, envying or grieving at the good of our neighbor, and all inordinate motions and affections toward anything that is his. I'm sure we've all struggled with jealousy or envy or coveting at one point in our lives, right? We know what this struggle is like. We've been jealous. We've been envious. We know what it's like to want what somebody else has. And this is the position that Saul is in at this moment. He's jealous. He's envying that the people gave David more praise than him. But look at verse 9 again. Look what it says. And Saul eyed David from that day on. Let Saul be a lesson to us of the dangerous and endless downward spiral we will face if jealousy and envy persist in our hearts. It didn't go away for Saul. He eyed David from that day on. Listen to this quote. Jealousy is a terrible emotion. Jealousy is the scab you keep picking only to have the wound fester. Jealousy is a hunger you simply cannot satisfy. The more you eat, the emptier you feel, and it forces you to feed it once again. Jealousy is a pain that will not abate. It persists and pounds us until we are pushed to the point of no return. Jealousy is a terrible and harsh master. Jealousy, it comes from a lack of contentment. And a lack of contentment comes from basing your identity in yourself rather than in who made you. Let me again, because it's really important. Jealousy comes from a lack of contentment. And a lack of contentment comes from basing your identity on yourself rather than in who made you. Saul's identity was found in himself. It was found in his kingdom, in his throne, in his reputation. It was found in people singing his praises. So when David's praise and reputation began to increase, he becomes discontent and he becomes jealous, and eyed David from that day on. As I was studying this week, I came across this question. Let me share it with you. You know, you might be convicted now, but I get convicted all week reading this stuff, okay? So listen to what I faced when I read this. If revival broke out in the place where you minister, would you rejoice? Of course I would, right? Wow, yes. But what if God broke loose in another church, in another denomination, and exponential salvation, baptism, and growth occurred in all the other churches, but not your church? Would you be jealous? Would you resent the anointing of God and the salvation of the lost in other churches? Or would you embrace God's work and rejoice in God's plan? Can I be real with y'all today? I really had to pause when I read that. I thought, would I be jealous? Would I? I had to wrestle with that. You know, what is in my heart? Would I be jealous? Because here's the reality. If I can't rejoice in what God is doing through another church or another person, then I've placed my identity in myself. And because I placed my identity in myself, I will be jealous of others, discontent with my own situation. I'll be discontent with my own life and what God has called Tyler to do, not because I'm worried about what's going on elsewhere. Am I content with what God has called me to do? Am I finding my identity in myself? It's easy to find your identity in yourself, isn't it? in your kingdom, in your reputation, in your success, when people sing your praises. That's what Saul did. And it made him jealous, and it made him discontent. And it ultimately drove him into a spiral of madness. He couldn't escape it. But as I thought about this question, I remembered David, and I remembered this passage of where David found his identity. You've probably heard this passage before. For you formed my inward parts. You knitted me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works. My soul knows it very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was being made in secret, intricately woven in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed substance. In your book were written, every one of them, the days that were formed for me, when as yet there were none of them. When you rest in the truth that you are fearfully and wonderfully made, when you rest in the truth that God has already written the days that were formed for you, every one of them, then you can be content in who God made you to be and what God has called you to do. You can rest that you've been fearfully and wonderfully made. And he's mapped out all the days of your life for you to walk in. When you rest in that, you don't care if other people are singing other people's praises more than yours. Because his praise and his validation becomes the only praise and validation that you live for. You're fearfully and wonderfully made. Rest in that. You're made by him. He holds your identity in the palms of his hands. That is your identity. Rest in that. Rest in that. But unfortunately, Saul didn't get that memo, okay? Saul didn't get the memo. So he starts into this endless spiral. And he comes up with these 3 different plots to murder David. And that's what the rest of 1 Samuel 18 is about. The first one is simple. Throw a spear and try to kill him. Okay, doesn't get any easier than that. The next day, a harmful spirit from God rushed upon Saul, and he raved within his house while David was playing the lyre. And as he did day by day, Saul had a spear in his hand, and Saul hurled the spear, for he thought, I will pin David to the wall. But David evaded him twice. Now, you may not physically throw a spear at someone. If you do, you call me this week, okay? You call me. You might not physically, you know what, actually just call the police. Don't even bother with me. Somebody, if you get spears at, call them. Anyway, you might not physically throw a spear at somebody, but when you live this type of evil and jealous thoughts, when they're constantly in your mind, when you live in them, you'll throw some spears. You'll throw some spears at people. Out of our discontent hearts, we can throw some really sharp spears, can't we? The words that come out of your mouth when you're living in a jealous and discontent state of mind are probably even worse than a spear. The words that you can hurl at your spouse, at your children, at the people who love you, at your friends, there's some serious spears. The good person out of the good treasure of his heart produces good, and the evil person out of his evil treasure produces evil. For out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. Jealous and discontent hearts will eventually produce spears that we throw at other people. And Saul, he literally threw a spear at David out of his jealous and discontent heart. But David evades him twice. So then Saul turns to some more subtle ways of trying to kill David. He turns to his daughters. That's right. You got it right. Saul uses his daughters to try and kill David next. Okay? Let's see what happens. Verse 17. Then Saul said to David, here is my elder, after he throws the spear at this guy, he says, here's my eldest daughter, Merab. This guy says it's a shame, it really is. Remember when Samuel mourned and grieved over Saul? This is why. I'm going to throw a spear, and then he goes, here's my elder daughter, Merab. I will give her to you for a wife. Only be valiant for me and fight the Lord's battles. For Saul thought, let not my hand be against him, but let the hand of the Philistines be against him. And David said to Saul, who am I and who are my relatives, my father's clan in Israel, that I should be son-in-law to the king? Now, if you remember, we touched on it last week, but Saul's daughter was promised to whoever defeated Goliath. So David defeated Goliath, so he had the right to marry Saul's daughter, Merab. So for his next plot, Saul uses this promise to try and put David in danger. He said Merab would be David's. He said, if only David would be valiant for him and fight the Lord's battles. But watch how David responds. This is so important. And it actually saves him from this plot. Look at how he responds. And remember, David is responding in this way, even though he already earned her. Even though she was already rightfully his, even though he did defeat Goliath, this is how David responds. He responds with humility. He says, who am I that I should be son-in-law to the king? And this spirit of humility is important for what happens next in verse 19. Responding with humility, like I said, it will actually save David from this plot. So verse 19, but at the time when Merab, Saul's daughter, should have been given to David, she was given to Adriel the Mehalathite for a wife. So when the time came that Merab should have been given to David, Saul suddenly gives her to somebody else. Why? Why would he do such a thing? Well, how would you feel if something that you earned was just unjustly taken away from you? You'd probably be outraged, right? One commentator puts it this way: Saul treacherously withdrew the offer as the time of nuptials approached, the intention being to arouse David's ardent spirit to retaliate and so become liable to the charge of treason. But all his efforts failed to arouse even a transient impulse for revenge. Why? Because David responded with humility. It was his humility. Oh, it's easy to get riled up, isn't it? Oh, I know I'm preaching to the choir. I can get riled up sometimes. How dare you take away this thing? You know, when you feel like you earned something and it's taken away, it's easy to get riled up. But is it possible that getting you riled up is exactly what the enemy wants? That's exactly what Saul wanted. He wanted to get David all riled up. Oh yeah, I'm gonna get him this way. But why didn't David fall into the trap of getting all riled up? The impulse of falling into Saul's trap? He said, this was in his heart, who am I that I should be son-in-law to the king? Who am I? Even though he earned it, even though I beat Goliath, even though it was his response was, who am I? Who am I? When the enemy tries to get a rise out of you, remember, nothing will frustrate the enemy more than a humble spirit. He can't touch a humble spirit. When the schemes don't work with Merab, now Saul then, he goes to his other daughter, Michal. He just can't get David. He can't get this guy. Throws spears at him, David evades him. Tries to tick him off. David responds with a humble heart and a humble attitude. So now he's got kind of, well, he'll have many more shots as we go along. But as for chapter 18, now he moves to Michal. Now Saul's daughter Michal loved David, and they told Saul, and the thing pleased him. Now, when Gwen fell in love with a guy like me, I'm sure her parents were very pleased with her choice. Very pleased. But anyway, Saul was pleased for another reason, okay? It was a different type of I'm pleased with this. He was like, oh, good. Now I have another way to get him, okay? So here's another plot. Saul thought, let me give her to him, that she may be a snare for him, and that the hand of the Philistines may be against him. Therefore Saul said to David a second time, you shall now be my son-in-law. And Saul commanded his servants, speak to David in private and say, behold, the king has delight in you, and all his servants love you. Now then become the king's son-in-law. And Saul's servant spoke these words in the ears of David, and David said, does it seem to you a little thing to become the king's son-in-law, since I am a poor man and have no reputation? And the servants of Saul told him, thus and so did David speak. Then Saul said, thus shall you say to David, the king desires no bride price except 100 foreskins of the Philistines, that he may be avenged of the king's enemies. Now Saul thought to make David fall by the hand of the Philistines. See, back in those days, the husband would have to pay the bride's father a dowry, okay? And the more prestigious the bride's family was, the higher the dowry would be. So Michael's dowry would be a very high price. But instead of asking for money, Saul uses this opportunity to ask something else from David. He desires no bride price except 100 foreskins of Philistines. Okay, I'm going to use that on whoever decides to come and ask for my daughter's hand. Marriage. It's going to be that hard, okay? But you get the idea. 100 foreskins of Philistines, that means he would kill 100 Philistines to be able to marry his daughter Michal. And of course, Saul's just hoping that in this pursuit, David would be killed by trying to get 100 foreskins of Philistines. Well, watch what happens. And when his servants told David these words, it pleased David well to be the king's son-in-law. Before the time had expired, David arose and went along with his men and killed 200 of the Philistines. And David brought their foreskins, which were given in full number to the king, that he might become the king's son-in-law. And Saul gave him his daughter Michal for a wife. You want 100 foreskins? I'll give you 200. Oh, that's another sermon for another time, I'm sure. But think about this. All of these plots that Saul tries to get David for fail. He can't touch this guy. He can't get him. He tries it with a spear. He tries to get a rise out of him with his daughter Merab. He tries to get him killed by trying to pursue his daughter Michal. But David goes through all of these things in just this one chapter. And he's going to face many more things through the rest of the book of 1 Samuel. All of this. Put yourself in David's shoes, though, for a minute. This wasn't easy. He had a spear thrown at him by his king. He was supposed to marry his daughter, and at the last minute, he got it pulled away. His reputation, something he earned, got it pulled away and taken away from him. To marry Saul's daughter, he had to go out and kill all of these Philistines to earn his place. This wasn't easy. After David had just beaten Goliath, all of these things. Why did all these things come against David? Why? And why is Saul bent on taking this guy down? Why does David have to face it? Well, as we close this morning, I really thought about this question. And I skipped a verse earlier, but I think I realized what it was. Let me go back to verse 14. And David had success in all his undertakings, for the Lord was with him. And when David saw that he had great success, he stood in fearful awe of him. Here's the reality of 1 Samuel chapter 18 and going forward through the rest of the book. David faced all these things. Why? Because the Lord was with him. See, when God puts something in you, the enemy will do everything he can to it out. The trials you face may even get so difficult that you'll be tempted to just hide it under a bushel because you're tired of the attacks that are over and over again perpetuated against you. Just hide under a bushel. It may not be easy, but the message this morning for you is don't let Satan it out. Don't hide it under a bushel. God put something in you. Let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Don't be surprised when you face spears coming at you. Don't be surprised when you have to face trials that you never thought you would have to. Don't be surprised when opposition comes against you, because you've got something inside of you. And guess what? The more spears and the more opposition comes your way, you know the only thing that means? You must be shining really, really bright. Let it shine. Let it shine. Even in the trial, even in the opposition. Because remember, when opposition and trials and spears come your way, you're in really good company. Blessed are you when others revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven. For so they persecuted the prophets who were before you. Listen, I think we forget this sometimes. It's a privilege to suffer as he did. It's an honor. It's a privilege to have spears thrown at you, to be attacked, and to face opposition as he did. It's a privilege to walk through the valley of the shadow of death, because it's there you know that he is with you, and he walked through it too. It's a privilege to live as Christ did and to walk the way he walked. He said, if anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross daily. Daily. Take up his cross. That's not fun. Take up his cross daily and follow me. It's a privilege. It's an honor to walk in the suffering in which he also walked in. Paul said, he said, to live is Christ. To live is Christ. So the spears are going to come. Attacks will come. You'll face strife. You'll face hard situations. In this world, you will have trouble. But you can take heart because he's already overcome this world. You're going to face pain. You're going to face betrayal. You're going to face heartache. But listen, you have to remember why you're facing them. It's because God put something inside of you. And the enemy will do everything he can to stop it from coming out. You know what's inside of you, don't you? You know what's inside? Jesus told you in John chapter 8. He said, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. That's what he's put inside of you, and that's what the enemy wants to out. You know, I realized something through studying this passage. This really got me. You know, the reason that trials come against you is the same reason why when they do, you have nothing to fear. Because listen, think about it. The attacks of the enemy will come because the Lord is with you, but the Lord is with you. So you have nothing to fear. you have nothing to fear. Look how this passage ends in verses 29 and 30. Saul was even more afraid of David. So Saul was David's enemy continually. Then the commanders of the Philistines came out to battle, and as often as they came out, David had more success than all the servants of Saul, so that his name was highly esteemed. Saul was so unnerved. He was so afraid of David because no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't stop that light from shining. He couldn't stop it. And no matter how hard the enemy tries to get your light to stop shining, he cannot do it. He cannot stop what God has placed inside of you from shining. Because even when it seems like we've been defeated, even when it seems like our light has died down, even when we do fail, because we do, we face failure. Even when something doesn't turn out the way that you hoped or thought it would, even when there is pain and loss in your life, the enemy still loses. Why? Because for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to his purpose. Even when we perceive failure, God is still sovereign over all things. And he can take what the enemy intended for evil and turn it for our good. So know that the spears are going to come your way. Know that the enemy will scheme against you. Know that he'll try to intimidate you. He'll try to get a rise out of you to make you afraid, because he wants you to hide that light under a bushel. He wants you to shrink away. And he's going to try to it out every way he can. But there is no need to fear. There's no reason to be intimidated. There's no reason to hide that light under the bushel, because here's the truth. Don't believe the lie that he can it out. Here's the truth. He can't it out. He can't blow it out. For I am sure that neither death, nor life, nor angels, nor rulers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor powers, nor height, nor depth, nor anything else in all of creation will be able to separate us from the love of God in Christ Jesus, our Lord. He can't blow it out. He can't stop it. So no matter what comes your way, have the strength to just keep letting it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. And when the spears and trials do come, you can share the heart of David when he wrote in Psalm 121, I lift my eyes up to the hills. From where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord who made heaven and earth. He will not let your foot be moved. He who keeps you will not slumber. Behold, he who keeps Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord is your keeper. The Lord is your shade on your right hand. The sun shall not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep you. He will keep you from all evil. He will keep your life. The Lord will keep your going out and your coming in from this time forth and forevermore. People of God, you have nothing to fear. You have nothing to fear. Yes, it's hard. Yes, you will face trials. Yes, you will face opposition. Yes, you will face pain. Yes, you will face heartache. But it's because there's something inside of you. And in the midst of that darkness that you face, oh, your light is gonna shine even brighter. When you know the truth, and when you don't believe the lies of the enemy that tries to get you to hide it under a bushel, and even that he can blow it out, because he can. He can. You are his, and he will help you. And he's got Just keep letting it shine. We're going to celebrate now the sacrament of the Lord's Supper. And it's a great reminder to you today of what is in you. He is in you. The light of the world is in you and shines brightly in you. And you are his, and he is yours. What could be closer than partaking of his body and of his blood today? It's a symbol to know that he is in you. He is for you. And if God is for you, who could never stand against